drive times?
Yes.
Well, there is at the moment, which is
That's on
very
big.
rare.
starting the service very shortly, so may I please remind those of you that have a mobile telephone with you, please switch it off or turn it to silent. A life well lived is a precious gift of hope and strength and grace. From someone who's made the world a brighter place, it's filled with moments sweet and sad, with smiles and sometimes tears, with friendships formed and good times shared, laughter through the years. A life well lived is a legacy of joy and pride and pleasure, a living lasting memory our grateful hearts will treasure. Good morning, my name is Jacqueline, I'm a civil celebrant, and on behalf of Neil and Brett and their families, I'd like to welcome you here today and thank you for attending. We've come together to pay our respects to a special lady, a lady who lived a long and a meaningful life, a good and respected woman, but most of all, a much-loved wife, mother and grandmother. We're here to honour and celebrate the life of Joyce Foster, who died on Wednesday, August the 12th at 10:40 at the Hammond Aged Care Facility, aged 95. In the days leading to her passing, Joyce had her family around her. Brett and Lee, Neil and Jenny, Christine, Lauren, Sean, Miriam have all been able to access the facility to spend time with her. She must have known how very dearly she was loved. Joyce had been living at Hammond Care since May after several hospital stays following a fall and an infection in February this year. Until that time, she'd been living independently in her own home at Raymond Terrace with the assistance of her friend and housekeeper, Julie Ferrier. Brett and Neil know the importance Julie's assistance and friendship was to Joyce, and are grateful to her for the support she showed their mother. And they would also like to acknowledge Dr. Elizabeth Keiko, Joyce's GP from Raymond Terrace Family Practice. When we become older, the support and friendship of our community can make such a difference to our ability to remain in our homes and feel happy and included for as long as possible. Not only did Joyce have a loving family to support her, she also had people like Carmel, a hairdresser at Glow. What incredible changes Joyce must have seen during her nearly 95 years. What a different world from when she was born in Coonabarabran in 1925 to our modern world of 2020. And Joyce did take an interest in what was happening in the world. She liked to keep up to date with the news and current affairs. She also enjoyed the lighter side of life, watching British murder series and Crown on TV, and was an avid reader of women's magazines. One of her greatest enjoyments was her garden. She loved bright yellow flowers, and I'm sure she would have appreciated the bright flowers that Brett chose for her, which we have here today. But more important than anything to Joyce was her role as wife and mother. When I met with Brett, Neil and Lee, they told me of a lovely lady who was absolutely devoted to her family. She was a supportive and caring wife who cared for her husband James when he lost his sight and hearing. Joyce missed James terribly when he died in 2013. She was a loving mother and a generous woman who would support the community by giving to charities. It's always hard when such an important member of your family dies. They're such a large part of your life and who you are. In present times, restrictions mean that not everyone that would have liked to attend is able to be here to grieve and to give you support. But I'm sure their thoughts are with you now. And Neil's now going to speak and give the eulogy on behalf of the family.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm Neil. I'm Joyce's oldest son. Thank you all for coming here today, and thanks for those people who might be tuning in over the internet who can't be here. Joyce Sloggett was born on 19th of October 1925 at Coonabarabran in Western New South Wales to Arthur Oliver Sloggett and Dorothy Agnes Sloggett, sometimes called Dolly, who was formerly Dorothy Douce. My granddad, Arthur, worked on the railways, and the family moved around very frequently. So after Coonabarabran, they ended up moving. Their second daughter Norma was born in 1927, and they were living in Kempsey, and then they went to Blackheath, where their third daughter Patricia Molly was born in 1930. Joyce attended Blackheath Public School, and I'm very grateful to my cousin Heather, who's managed to dig out some historical documents for us, and one of them was a page from the Katoomba Daily from the December 1933, which records that Mum won a prize in the second class, and her sister, my auntie Norma, won a prize in the first class. So she was somebody who loved her schooling. Tells you a lot about what sort of news was going on in Blackheath those days, that they were reporting the school prizes, but it was wonderful to have that. And no doubt in later years, when Mum saw her children and her grandchildren get academic prizes and other things like that, she thought we were carrying on her family tradition. The family moved to Griffith, where Mum went to high school, and their final child and only son, Rodney Frederick, was born there in 1941. And my sister-in-law Lee, who's been sorting through some of Mum's papers, discovered that Mum kept her New South Wales Intermediate Certificate, which she received in March 1941, where she got top marks in history and physiology and hygiene. And in later life, she always loved reading and watching history documentaries and keeping the house clean, so I guess she carried on with those interests over the years. The family later moved to Marrickville. Mum's mother, Dolly Sloggett, sadly suffered from kidney disease and passed away in 1949. Rod was only 8 when his mother died, and so the 3 girls played a large part in bringing him up and looking after Grandad. We have some documents that Heather also had discovered, and Lee also discovered, about which contained references that Mum got from various places she was working. She worked as a real estate agent and a typist for about 7 years, and then she worked at Marcus Clark & Co, a department store near Central Station, up until 1954. So we come to the crucial moment for our family, which was that fateful visit to the Phyllis Bates Dance Studio, where she met a young Air Force aircraft fitter called Jim Foster. There's even a newspaper clipping you can find on the internet from December 1953 that tells you the Phyllis Bates Dance Studio was in 210 Pitt Street next to the Lyceum. So having met there, the romance developed, and Mum and Dad were married in October 1954 in Marrickville. And Mum then got to know Dad's family, his parents, his siblings Edie, Peter and Alice, and Alice's family, Lynette and John and Vicky and Andrew, have also sent their condolences and sent some flowers along today. So Mum and Dad, having got married, were together through life's up and downs for the next 58 or so years. Children started arriving in 1956, which was a wonderful event for me because that was me being born. And then, as well as that, in relatively rapid succession over 2 yearly intervals, we had Grant and Brett come along. Dad, like most members of the Air Force, was moving around the country and the world, whether or not the world or country needed it, it seemed to us, but at any rate, we had regular moves, and Mum and I obviously went with them, and the kids. I seem to recall remembering I went to 9 different schools over primary and secondary education. We lived in Schofields, we lived in Raymond Terrace for a little while in Edinburgh Street in what locals call the Royals area. We also went over to Leichhardt in Queensland, Penang in Malaysia, and we came back to Ipswich, to Elizabeth in South Australia, Broadmeadows in Melbourne, and finally we settled in Raymond Terrace. And I guess I was interested to see there's a pattern here because Mum kind of got used to moving around with her father, I think, with the railways, and well, with her new husband, she was also used to moving around. I guess the most exotic of all those locations was Malaysia, and one of the fond memories that we kids had was that Mum went to Chinese cooking classes and she learned how to cook sweet and sour pork, so we developed our legendary taste for this dish, I guess, over there. Although when we came back to Australia, she didn't really persist with it all that much. But that was something that was very memorable. While we were in Ipswich after we came back, Dad was sent over to the United States for what was meant to be 6 months, but ended up being longer, and Mum was left with her wonderful boys, and we all struggled a bit, but we survived. The Air Force then at one stage was suggesting that Mum and Dad move away from Raymond Terrace just as we boys were in high school, and so Dad retired from the RAF at that point. In 1978 they bought their home, and he went to work for the TAFE. In all this time, I don't think Mum ever went back to paid work, as far as I can recall. She devoted herself to the hard work of caring for and feeding and cleaning and washing for Dad and us 3 boys. And I have to confess that by the time I left home and went to uni, my first housemates had to teach me a few things about cooking and other things like that, because I was not very au fait with that. Mum had done it all while we were at home. And I think, yes, Laurie, who's here, his wife Sue was part of one of my first houses and probably remembers teaching me some things about cooking. So after Dad eventually retired from work, he and Mum travelled around Australia. They even made it over to New Zealand at one point. Her sons got married to wonderful wives, Jenny, Chris and Lee. and the next generation of grandchildren started arriving: Rachel, James, Claire, Miriam, Lauren and Sean. And in more recent years, the grandchildren got married, and we welcomed into our family Daniel and Daphne and Andrew and Ryan. And then they started having children, and Mum had 11 great-grandchildren. Sasha, Martin, Silas, Anthea, Naomi, whose middle name is Joyce, Imogen, William, Eleanor, Charlie, Jack and Nate. So our Christmas get-togethers have been becoming bigger and bigger over the years, and Mum was more often than not called Grandma in recent years, just because she had so many grandchildren, of course, and she loved to see her family around her. Life was not always easy for Mum though. She lost both her beloved sisters Pat and Norma through to kidney disease, and she even lost her beloved niece Jennifer at an early age. And Mum was very caring though. I remember that Mum would travel down on the train from Newcastle to visit Auntie Norma, who was in the last stages of her illness, for about 18 months. Regularly, once a week, she would go down and visit Auntie Norma. In 2013, Dad passed away from leukaemia. He'd also been unwell though for some time. He'd lost a lot of his sight and hearing, and Mum was heroic in the way she cared for Dad at home and looked after him. She also then lost my beloved brother Grant, who passed away in 2019. So she had some things that she had to wrestle with. She was generally in good health for a long time. She ate well, she looked after herself. She loved her weekly visits to the hairdressers in Raymond Terrace, her favourite hairdresser Carmel, as Jacqueline has mentioned. She had medical appointments for eyesight and hearing, and her daughters-in-law, Jenny, Chris and Lee, were often on call to help, and Grant was often over at Mum's place as well. Mum also enjoyed her friendship with her daughter-in-law's mothers, with Wyn and with June and with Faye. Mum then had a heart episode in late 2017. After that, she had an increasing number of health issues. She was able to stay at home, as we've already said, with support from people like Dr. Keiko, from the wonderful Carl from Bloom's Pharmacy, who kept on supplying Mum with her medication. He would often stop in with her Webster pack on his way home from work. Cleaning in the house provided by Julie, who was a wonderful help to Mum, and occasional helpful visit from the lovely folk from the Raymond Terrace Community Church next door, including Pastor Tim, and those folks have actually provided some of our morning tea this morning as well. However, as time went on, an infection struck Mum in February this year and sent her to hospital with a complex of problems, and in the end she accepted she had to move out of the house, and she stayed for the last few months of her life in Hammond Care, residential care in Waratah, where she was very well cared for, and she passed away on the 12th of August at the age of 94. There's so much to be thankful for when we think back on Mum's life. She loved learning and reading until the last few years when her sight wouldn't let her do that. When her boys became fans of Doctor Who, she started collecting Doctor Who memorabilia, and I'm astonished at how much has now been passed on to me. She also loved the Harry Potter movies and those sorts of things. She would watch the cricket, the rugby league. She was a long-time member of the Knights Supporters Club. She watched murder mysteries on TV like Morse and Agatha Christie. And over the last few years, she became somewhat addicted to watching the ABC News channel, and so she would be very much up with what was going on in the world. I would regularly come to take her to lunch on the weekend, and she would tell me some news development that I hadn't caught up with, because she was really in touch, and she was able to let you know what was going on. Mum loved and served her family. When grandchildren arrived, she and Dad would sometimes look after those that were around, quite often Lauren and Sean, because our branch of the family was around elsewhere. But we often would visit on Christmas, and I can still remember when we would arrive, that when we came to visit Mum for Christmas breakfast was always Cocoa Pops, and you would have little mini sausages and bacon and those sorts of things. So Mum and Dad were married for almost 60 years, and she loved her family. She would remember the children's birthdays. Up until recent days, she would also remember all the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, and she would pick up toys for her family when she went to the post office. We've all been very blessed by Mum.
and her great love and care for us. We can all be very grateful that we were able to know her and to have our lives touched and enriched by knowing her. This was a lovely gift that God had given us. Mum herself was not a churchgoer, but occasionally when I visited in hospital and in Waratah, I would read the 23rd Psalm to her, I would pray with her, and I'm very grateful to God for giving her to us, to our family, such a devoted and loving mother, grandmother and great-grandmother. Such a wonderful gift. My daughter Miriam is now going to sing for us a song that both Mum and Dad loved, which was Amazing Grace.
Well, while Grandma was at Hammond Care, I'd sometimes visit and bring my ukulele. She loved to hear this. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. 'Twas great through many dangers, toils and snares I have already come. 'Twas grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
That was so beautiful, thank you, Miriam. And now Christine would like to share a few words with us.
Hardly think I need to introduce myself, but I'm Grant's wife, Christine, one of the daughter-in-laws. Can you hear me? Joyce, or Mrs. Foster, as she initially liked to be called, loved to chat. This was evident in the first few seconds of meeting her. She was clearly keen to meet the girl that Grant had been dating, and she overwhelmed me with her welcoming nature and her gregariousness before I could even put one foot into the lounge room. And this I was to discover was her nature, warm, social, welcoming, and abounding in information about recent local, national, international news, and of course the weather forecast. She often amused us with her foibles, one of which was vowing to leave the country should Bill Shorten be Prime Minister. Life was very traditional. No Rach, Mim, Claire Bear, Loz for Joyce. Her roast Sunday lunch, followed by self-saucing pudding, cheese and crackers, all served on her best cutlery and crockery, was one of our most loved routines in our early married years. Not so much though as the Good Friday tuna bake. Joyce had grown up in a female-dominated household and gone on to life in a male-dominated home. With her, Jim, Neil, Grant and Brett, she was outnumbered. It soon became evident that she wanted the numbers evened up, and in 1982 she was overjoyed when all of the boys were married and the male-female ratio was now even. The very next weekend, Rachel, the first of her adored grandchildren, was born. But for Joyce, it was a double celebration, Rachel. She wasn't just happy that you were born, the girls now outnumbered the boys. And the only problem was she had to do an extra lotto entry to cover all the additional birthdays. Joyce was now grandma, and the most wonderful grandmother and great-grandmother. Last year, or maybe the year before, I videoed her reading a story and chatting with Nate, because I was awed at how perfect her interaction was. And I remember showing Grant and Lauren and Ryan and Sean, look, this is what we're supposed to do. She was forever searching for the perfect gift for each of their birthdays. Each gift and card were carefully selected for their age, their likes, their personalities. How very disappointed she was when the local ABC shop was to close. Grandma and Grandpa cared for either or both of our children, Lauren and Sean, 1 day a week for 8 years, and then during the school holidays until their early high school years. It was an extraordinary effort on their part, and only once did she complain to me, and it was that I had run out of paper towel. Just imagine that. In later years, the carer role was reversed, and I could never make her understand that she had given more to all of our families than we could ever give to her. If I were to suggest something, or indeed if any of us were to suggest something just not quite so, her response would be, oh dear, oh no, I don't think so, or oh, no, that wouldn't be quite right, or no, that wouldn't be quite proper. Joyce was incredibly loyal and held many things firm throughout her life. Frequently, she would pronounce to anyone, I heard it many times, that she was lucky to have 3 wonderful daughter-in-laws. My warmest memory was just before she lost consciousness last week. And I said, Joyce, how lucky we have been to meet each other, to have known each other. And her face lit up with the biggest smile. She nodded, and she said thank you from the bottom of her heart. And I knew she meant for us 3 daughter-in-laws at that time. Mrs. Foster, Joyce's grandma, was quite an extraordinary woman. We were all blessed to have her in our lives. Rest in peace, Joyce.
Today we farewell my darling grandma,
Grandma was 1 in a million, an amazing friend and our biggest supporter. She surrounded us all with love and comfort. For 32 years, she was my constant. She was my twin soul. Grandma was incredibly clever, and I joked with her even this last month that she would have done well on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Her response, "Oh no dear, I don't know enough about music these days." She was my favourite weather reporter and knew the weather conditions in every location that there was a family member. She was an avid royal correspondent, and this is where I developed my interest. She was the first person I called to discuss every royal wedding, every birth, every new outfit. Grandma shared all of the gossip magazines with me. We bought One New Idea, One Woman's Day every week, and One Woman's Weekly once a month. She had the news on 24/7 when she wasn't watching her favourite shows and was guaranteed to give you an update every time you called. Grandma knew exactly which of the biscuits or treats every member of the family liked and always had them on hand in her pantry/oven. She liked Chop Tops at the cinema, hot cross buns from January, Werther's and Fruit Mentos, which she always had in her pocket with a tissue. She liked lunch at the club, red tulip Easter eggs, her coffee or tea black, and could cover more topics in a short period of time on the phone than any person I knew. Grandma smelt like Chanel No. 5 and wore brooches when her eyesight meant that her favourite necklaces were too hard to put on. She had her favourite numbers in the lottery and her favourite sporting teams, the Knights being mentioned by far. She taught me how to play bingo and the pokies and a mean hand of dominoes, and blatantly asked for extras of whatever Woolworths were giving away, so I always had enough for my class. Grandma also loved every gizmo and gadget that she could possibly find, and all of them were bought for those just-in-case moments. She told me that some of her favourite memories were travelling with her sister Norma, Air Force balls and dressing up with Grandpa, and family time at Woy Woy. Grandma was there for every birthday. A major event in my life. There is nothing that I have done in my life that she was not there for. She knew everything that went on in every member of the family, and she kept every memorabilia that any of us could ever have collected, including postcards from all over the world. She treasured her family beyond all, took pride in our achievements, and we will miss her forever.
We're going to listen to We Are One from the Emu Music album now. This song was written by Joyce's granddaughter Claire, who's one of the people that's not able to be with us today. While we listen to the music, we'll watch a slideshow of photographs of Joyce. And as the photos roll past, let your thoughts drift to the happy and the special times you spent with her. If you wish, you might use this time to pray. Otherwise, just let your thoughts go to the place that Joyce occupies in your heart.
Sister, let me wipe your tears. Brother, let me bear your fears. Come on, every daughter, every son. Let us walk in life, for we are one. Though we walk along in broken road, we are here to bear each other's love and forgive us Sister, let me wipe your tears. Brother, let me bear your fears. Come on, every daughter, every son. Let us walk in love, for we are one. Though we walk along in broken road, we are here to bear each other's load. And forgive as you've forgiven us. Let us walk in love, for we are one. We are one in the Father's love. We are every tribe and every tongue. We are found in the risen sun.
As you heard earlier from Neil, Psalm 23 had special meaning for Joyce, and Brett's now going to read the New International Version for us now.
Psalm 23, Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I'll fear no evil, for you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Please stand. In this quiet place, remember Joyce with love. Cherish the things she brought to your life and consider the things she thought important, her family and her friends, and say goodbye. Remember that nothing can ever change her love for you or your love for her. Joyce loved and cared for her family, and perhaps these words might echo her wishes for you. I'd like the memory of me to be a happy one. I'd like to leave an afterglow of smiles when life is done. I'd like to leave an echo whispering softly down the ways of happy times and laughing times, bright and sunny days. I'd like the tears of those who grieve to dry before the sun of happy memories that I leave when life is done. With tenderness and respect, we farewell Joyce Foster. It's the destiny of humans for their bodies to come to our earth and to leave it. We cherish the joy we have felt through knowing Joyce as we continue our own journeys, and we give thanks for her life. In a moment, Joyce will be escorted from the chapel by her family. Please remain standing and follow them. And then you're invited to come back here to the chapel for refreshments, to spend more time together, and I'm sure share a few more memories. Once again, on their behalf, thank you for attending, and travel home safely. Would the forebearers please come forward?
Unforgettable, that's what you are.
Unforgettable, though near or far.
Like a song of love that clings to me, how the thought of you does things to me never before. Has someone been there?
Unforgettable, in every way.
And forevermore,
And forevermore,
that's how you'll stay.
that's how you'll stay.
That's why, darling, it's in